Good evening. My name is Jason Busby, and I teach social science at Agoura High School, which most of you know, but we have a television audience, so I will say some obvious things as part of my presentation. Ned did a pretty good job of giving you an intro to model schools, but I just want to clarify one thing. Model schools really does three different things, and it's run by the International Center for Leadership and Education, which is run by Bill Daggett. And Dr. Daggett has been working in education for over 25 years. He was a commissioner in New York State. And the International Center is a nonprofit institute that does research year-round to try and benefit education. The reality is we have thousands of schools and thousands of districts in 50 states, all kind of working independently from each other. And some of us do some things really well, and those aren't always the same things. And so what the International Center does is bring together that research and those ideas so that we can actually share and not reinvent the wheel. And so when we go to the conference, we see three things, and you're going to see elements of all three of those things here tonight. One, we see keynote addresses, research, cutting-edge research, some of which is literally days old when we get there, about what's going on with national and international trends, new technologies, new programs that are available, new things that we come to understand about how students learn and how teachers teach. And so that's all shared as part of the conference. You also have vendors who are coming up with new programs. We're going to see a little bit about I Can Learn tonight. In the spring, when we hope to do another one of these forums, I hope to be talking about a new program we literally just started this week called Expert Space. And so that's another thing. And then, of course, there's the schools themselves. And you actually get to see educators and administrators who are doing this in their classrooms and the impact that it's made. This year when I went, I was listening to a keynote by Ray McNulty, who is one of the executive directors. And one of the things that Ray does on a regular basis is he goes out into the business community and asks them, what do you want students to be able to do? You know, what is the key when they come out of schools? We hear these stories in the news all the time about students aren't prepared for anything when they get out of school. What is it that you're looking for? And the list he got, as he explained to us, was pretty much what he expected. We want our kids to be creative. We want them to be hardworking. We want them to have integrity. We want them to be prepared in those senses. But he was shocked that one particular description that almost always is there was not there. The businessman he was talking to, this happened to be a group from Texas, did not mention problem solving. And you almost always hear, well, we want problem solvers when you have that conversation. Yeah, Ray asked these guys, he said, don't you want problem solvers? And they said, no, we don't want problem solvers. If we have problem solvers, that means we have problems. We want problem predictors. We want people who are going to anticipate problems and make sure they never happen, not solve them after the fact. And as soon as Ray shared that story, I went, well, that's an excellent point. I teach history. And so the first thing that occurred to me is, okay, how do I teach problem predicting, which is inherently about the future, in history, which is inherently about the past? And so one of the first things I did is I took advantage of an opportunity we have at Agoura High School in the Las Vegas Unified School District. I went this year. Claudia Hirschel, I'm going to ask her to come on to the center here, went 4 years ago when the conference was in Washington, D.C. And so the first thing I did was I came back and started abusing my department mate here and saying, okay, how do we do this? How do we create a project that can help our kids learn about, how to predict accurately for the future? Because that's a skill set. And if you can do it, you're not part of the 12% who are unemployed in California right now. I was reading the paper just this morning about how much unemployment is not a problem in Silicon Valley. How they're looking for kids who are creative, who can come up with solutions before it becomes a problem. They're hiring literally kids who are still in college and giving them ridiculous salaries if they have the skills. So the question became, how do we teach it? And what Ms. Hirschel and I came up with is what we call the problem predictor assignment. I'm going to let her start to talk about what that looks like. Yes?
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. In terms of our problem predictor assignment, one of the first things we really wanted the kids to focus on were what skills. And so one of the things you'll see on the assignment when it comes up on the screen is that we have the skills that we expect the students to be able to master, at least attempt at the top of the page. So that's something else that you'll find there. The other thing that we really wanted to make clear with our students was, in the beginning, we don't expect them to have this foundation of knowledge. And so one of the things we tried to focus on was taking them up to a certain point in history. We were looking for turning points. We were looking for periods of time where we could say, okay, what's happening in this moment and what's going to shift? How is this a turning point in history? And the first topic we really chose was the Punic Wars in Rome. And so we taught our students basically everything about the Romans up we asked our students to come up with pretty much a thorough description and looking at 5 areas in particular. We asked them to look at politics, we asked them to look at the military, we asked them to look at what the social life was like, the religion of the Romans, and what was happening in terms of the economy of the Romans in 146 BC, or up to 146 BC. And what we really just wanted them to do was a description at that point. So we asked them to write a page, we had them write a draft, and at that point we had them bring in those drafts, not to be graded, but for those students to be able to have an opportunity to discuss. We held Socratic seminars in our classes. We wanted our students to all kind of at least meet a consensus about what Rome really did look like up to 146 BC. And this was a great learning opportunity for myself as a teacher too. I got to see where my students were a little bit weak in terms of content. Was there something that maybe I should have spent more time on as a teacher? And so that was really helpful, and through the Socratic seminar, I felt, and I think Jason, I speak for you too, we were able to kind of bolster those areas. Maybe we weren't as thorough in terms of the polytheistic religion. Okay, this was a great chance for us to kind of fix that. At which point we then had our students go home and fix their papers. This is the part of the writing process that we're working on as well. We want our students to be able to not only communicate orally, but also in terms of their writing. And so in the writing process, of course, the draft gets taken home, they make changes, and then they come back with a better draft at that point, which leads us into our second phase.
Yeah, one of the things that we're talking about is there's a lot of discussion, and actually I think the elementary schools do a better job of it than we do in the high schools, and that's formative assessment versus summative assessment. Yeah, and one of the things, we do a great job with summative assessment at the high schools. We judge you, we label you, and then we pass you on. And there's a lot of evidence that doesn't work for kids, that they really need that feedback, they need an opportunity to rework those skills, and we had that built in. And with the phase 1 paper, it was pretty much something I think, although it was more writing than sophomores in college prep usually like to do, it was familiar. Okay, describe what you've learned is essentially what they've been asked. With the phase 2 paper is where we really started to take them off in a different direction, and there was some confusion there. We said, all right, now you know what's happening in Rome at the end of the Third Punic War. Now you need to make predictions. What do you think is going to happen to what at that time is the Roman Republic in the areas of the political system? And realize that Standard 10.1, which is at the top of this, is all about the development of Western political thought, and the collapse of the Roman Republic is a key to that. What's going to happen to the Roman military, the strongest in the world at that time? What's going to happen to the Roman economy? What's going to happen to Roman religion? I mean, Christ is going to be born pretty soon. That kind of changed things. What's going to happen to the Roman social structures? And so you're going to make predictions. And the kids took a little bit of time to get their feet grounded with that. They said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, here's what you're going to be graded on. You're not going to be graded on whether or not your predictions are right or wrong. Because then you can just Google that or look it up in a textbook, and that's not really what we want to teach. What you're being graded on is, why are you making these predictions? Do you understand cause and effect? Do you understand why these things are going to happen? So I had many students who got A's on this assignment and were wrong, but they had good logic. They had really good logic about why they thought things were going to happen. And so they were actually engaged in that. I had some students who just made a list. Well, I looked up in the textbook, this is what happened. I said, great, that wasn't the assignment. And the third phase, which came after the second phase, and Ms. Hirschfeld is going to talk about, really kind of brought those two halves together.
In the third phase of the assignment, we wanted our students to look at not just were they right or wrong, but what made their predictions correct or incorrect. We were looking for an analysis of their predictions. What actually happened in Rome that made your predictions incorrect, or perhaps made them correct, if that happened to be the case with many students. And this was a little more difficult for the students we found. This was a bit more of a hit and miss. Some students absolutely understood it, they got it, no problems at all. And for some students, they really struggled with this. It became a little more of the phase 1 paper where we saw more and more description than anything else. But in terms of looking at the cause and effect and how that kind of all ties together with what they thought was going to happen, this was an important skill for them. This is something that they're going to use not just this one time. We're going to continue to do these problem predictors, and hopefully this is a skill they'll be able to take outside of the classroom as well.
And I think it's an absolutely essential skill. You know, obviously they're not going back to ancient Rome unless Doc Brown shows up in his DeLorean. But these are kids who are going through all kinds of changes in their lives. I've been teaching sophomores for 14 years. And it's a time where they're changing physically, they're changing mentally, they're changing emotionally. They get to learn to drive soon, they're dating, and soon, of course, they're going to college. And so they have to get used to change. And I would argue this is a very important skill set they're doing. And as Ms. Hirschfeld mentioned, it's what we're going to come back to. And what we're expecting to see over time is that they're going to get better at it. That obviously is the goal. And if we can graduate college prep, we're not talking about an AP class. We're not talking about what are traditionally considered our best kids. We're talking about our average students who need this skill as much as anybody else. They have to be able to go into the world, and it's a changing world, and be able to do that. And so where we got this from is the ideas that we've learned over time at model schools. This was not a lesson that was handed to me there, but I was given the knowledge and the skills, partially through model schools, partially through other resources that the district has provided. And Ms. Hirschfeld and I, of course, share a common vocabulary. When I come back and start talking about model schools, I don't sound like an alien, because we've both been to the conference and we both know what we're talking about. And so that allowed us to do that. And so that's just one example in a college prep world history class of an impact that we've had on our students just this year. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next presenter now, because it's not just for high schools. This year we had the opportunity to bring elementary and middle school teachers for the first time, including our kindergarten teacher, Ms. Lisa Cordero. Did I get it right? All right. And I will bring up the phone.
So I teach kindergarten. I've taught kindergarten and first grade in Las Virgenes at Brown Meadow and Sumac, and the Community Learning Center, which is now Mariposa. So what I took from the conference is more just about the focus on the brain and gender studies and how we can apply that in the classroom, and it was more reinforcing going to the conference, I think, than anything else. So this is just to give the brain in your head that we need to learn more about as teachers and parents and children. So I just wanted to get that image in your head of the 4 lobes, and you can go to the next one. We're just going to be talking mostly about the frontal lobe and how it fosters the higher level of complexity and unpredictability. And what we talk about when we're talking about rigor and relevance is in order to do those higher level thinking skills, the unpredictability and novelty and problem solving is what kind of gets those dendrites firing in the brain. So I just wanted to point out the frontal lobe. And teachers, what we can use brain research for is increased small group learning. So in kindergarten, we have centers, I think grades K through 3 especially, do a lot of small group work. And that's just better for kids conversing with teachers and a lot of dialogue going back and forth about what they're learning. More open-ended questions. For example, just what Jason was saying, how would you solve that versus would you have done A or B? Free debate, free from grading. I teach kindergarten, so I know that in kindergarten they don't feel very stressed from grades, so they're a lot more open to creativity and telling me exactly what they think right in that moment, but I know as they get older, the testing and the stress kind of, inhibits their creative thinking. Student communities, anytime you give a child a job, or a leadership role, or they're the star of the week, or the line leader, I'm speaking from a very elementary standpoint, but it's, empowering for them, and they feel like they're their true best self. Arranging seating in a circular formation, I know that it was Dr. Nussbaum when we were at the conference, he said, well, what if I put all of you in a circle right now? And we all just had to have this conversation in a circle. Anytime you change the routine, you're fostering your brain growth. So if I said, all of you need to stand up and listen to me, or all of you need to sit in a circle. We sit in a circle all the time in kindergarten. So I'm always on the ground, crisscross applesauce, we're sitting, and everyone's making that eye contact. That's like council circle, for example. I know that I believe Mariposa is still using at the elementary level that I do in my room.